Hello to all the investors listening to this podcast, who hopefully by now will have read the latest news release in relation to Asiamet's financing for the BKM copper project. Joining us to discuss today's release will be CEO Darren McClelland from Asiamet HQ in Jakarta and Executive Chairman Tony Manini from Melbourne. Guys, thanks for your time. Essentially, today's release updates investor further on progress on the financing piece, since the update to the feasibility study was successfully completed in May, and also updates further on a subsequent news release relating to the appointment of various advisors to support the financing process and outlining next steps. Essentially, you've now been progressing these steps. So, Tony, if I could pass over to you to update on how things have been going and what the mood's like at Asiamet.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Sasha. No, the mood's very upbeat. We've got a lot of work going on. Darren will sort of give some insights into that shortly. Since the feasibility study came out, I think that was a really critical piece of work to get under our belt. As we all know, there's a lot of inflationary pressures around the globe, and I think it's fair to say the results, really through the excellent work of Darren and the team, were probably better than expected. Very strong outcomes across the whole spectrum. We are now sort of taking the outcomes of that study, the positive outcomes of that study, and seeing as a result of that significant interest in what we're doing as we move through the formal part of the financing process. So I think it's set a foundation, Sasha, that's really put us in a good place in terms of the progress of the finance and a lot of the engagements we've got going on around the finance and also Darren's engagements around taking the project forward. So really good foundation. We're feeling really positive and confident, and everything we're seeing so far, the project's being well supported off the back of that great work that's been done.
Thanks, Tony. So, Darren, over the past few weeks, you've been conducting a few site visits, and today's release discusses two of them. So, they were the visit by the potential lead financier and the ITE. So, could you please tell us a bit more about these and why they're significant milestones for the company?
Yeah, sure, Sasha, and yeah, thanks. It's good to be able to catch up and talk through some of these things. So, firstly, the bank visit that went well, and the bank representatives that attended the site visit with me, were specialists in the project financing area, and certainly mostly around resource project financing. So they're really experienced people who understand the things they need to look at quickly when they're assessing projects, for taking forward to financing. So it was good. It was a good visit. We had an opportunity sort of taking through the site. It's always good for groups to see the primary transport and logistics route from the capital city through to the site and get an appreciation of what's required for moving things in and out of the site. We had a chance to have a walk through the BKM, across the BKM deposit, and give them a good appreciation. You're able to see mineralization at surface up in BKM and really walk through the area where we're going to be mining initially. So it's good to really good to give people a feel for the nature of the mining, sort of the nature of the ground in which we're going to be working in. Separately, a site visit with the independent technical expert, and that's SRK Consulting out of their Perth office. So SRK, their name may be familiar to investors. They are the group that reviewed the previous feasibility study back in sort of the first half of 2022 and gave us the feedback and input into things that we should address as part of the feasibility study update that we completed in May this year. So good to have some continuity in that technical, the technical review and understanding of the project. So probably a bit of a different focus with respect to the bank, but still, having to look at the same things and get that level of appreciation of how the project will be developed.
Thanks, Dan. So just to qualify something for the audience, when you're talking about potential lead financier, you mean the lead bank here who will be organising the senior debt piece of the finance?
Yes, correct. That's right.
So You mentioned in the RNS globally recognized group. Is there anything else you can tell us at this stage about this group?
Oh no, not at this stage. I mean, we're working through a process, and the process with that group. Yeah, the key input into progressing that is the outcome of the work from SRK. So SRK's work as an ITE, we have been discussing with the potential lead financier, and we both agreed that SRK were best placed for doing this work, and they're certainly very comfortable with the outcomes that will be delivered through that process, and so that's really that's the key input, and then we look at how that gets taken forward to initial credit committee approval.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So in the RNS, you also refer to local Indonesian groups. Could you talk a little bit more about those?
Yes, certainly. At this point in time, we do have an expectation and a desire that significant Indonesian banks will certainly join the senior lending group, and at an appropriate point in time, as we've progressed through this first round of technical due diligence and the work with the potential lead financer. We've made it very clear that it would be our intention and desire to certainly have leading Indonesian financial institutions, banks, be able to join that senior lending facility with the lead financier.
In a syndicate, of course.
Yes, in a syndicate arrangement, yeah.
So what's the timeline on getting through to this next stage then? Is there anything to talk about that? You mentioned credit approval as part of this process.
I mean, we're hopeful. I'd like to qualify timelines when they're not things that I necessarily can control directly myself, but certainly we're aiming to have, by and large, the ITE work hopefully completed by the end of August. We'd like to think that the work with the potential lead financier and taking that through to credit committee is going to be something that's happening in September.
Okay, thanks, Darren. So, Tony, we can switch back to you. The news release says that potentially large components of the financing will be from senior bank debt. Could you qualify how much at this stage?
Yeah, sure, Sasha. So just to reiterate, so that it's the banking syndicate, so the lead bank and a number of subordinate banks, which typically sit under the lead bank. So it's a financing package. We are looking to do somewhere between 50 and 60% of the total finance through the debt provision with the senior banks. So if you look at the capital cost of the project, including contingency, etc., we were talking about $235 million. So if you sort of run those numbers simply through, 50 to 60% gives you circa $120 to $140 million of senior debt. So that's the quantum that we're talking about. I think just to sort of reinforce some of the things that Darren has sort of touched on, we, through our past experiences and current experiences with partnerships in various different entities that I'm involved in, we do have some strong partnerships with a number of the Indonesian banks, as well as the proposed or lead financier that Darren's referred to here, and likewise does our major shareholder, Doyd. So this is sort of familiar territory for us. It's not unfamiliar, where the people are known to us, they know us pretty well. So, it's a fairly standard process, but the quantum, Sasha, is somewhere in the order of $120 to $140 million of senior debt.
Another key aspect of the news release are the interest from off-takers and the several leading international metals trading groups advancing their DD to provide indicative term sheets. Could you potentially talk to that a little bit?
I just mentioned before that, the 235 capex that we are looking to solve for, somewhere around in the order of 120, 140 is senior debt. So clearly there's, a gap between those two numbers, and how we're going to fill that gap. There's a number of different ways which we've referred to in the past and in the NR today, and they are really, prepayment offtake finance, which is around the product, selling for the product for payment today, and then there's other forms, which are equipment, construction, finance, and the like, as well as the potential, for some equity sell down, either in the project level or other projects. So in terms of the offtake, we are looking at a piece here which is just off the top of my head, somewhere probably in the order of $30 to $40 million. And we've got, we've got, some real traction here. I mean, everyone will be aware that it's invested in the copper space, that there's a real shortage of copper units around, and particularly copper cathode in the Asian region is in short supply and trading at a premium in the market. So as a consequence of that, when you've got a new project like ours that's due to come on fairly soon, and there's not too many of those. In fact, there's very few, if any of those, the demand or the interest from these parties is strong. Now, who are they? Well, there's a whole a raft of different groups. I'm not going to name them here, but they're common and familiar names when it comes to metals trading. Anybody that Googles metals trading will probably see a top group of those businesses that come up, and they're familiar names, and they're some of the parties that we're engaging with at the moment. So where are we at? We've signed NDAs, and they're all of those groups are currently progressing DD. Some of them are a bit more advanced than others, with a view to putting a term sheet on the table for us. And as I said earlier at the start, that will be a prepayment, so that'll form part of our financing, a block of capital, which comes in, and then you subsequently deliver metal into that as you sort of are producing going forward. So well advanced on that, Sasha, and I think making really good progress in tandem with the senior debt work, and things are coming along nicely there. We'd expect to have some term sheets on the table relatively soon.
Thanks, Tony. I'm sure the market would be very interested in looking out for those. So, Tony, could we touch upon Grant Samuel? And they were appointed recently, and the work they're doing, and maybe who they are, because I know they're very well regarded in the Asia Pacific region, but potentially the market might need a little bit of a background information as to who they are and what services they're providing for Asiamet.
Yeah, okay. So look, Grant Samuel's very well-known entity in Australasia, as you say, Sasha. They are probably one of the leading independent financial advisory group in the metals and mining space, in particular here in the Australasian region. They cover a range of services under that corporate advisory. So it's corporate advisory, M&A advisory, financing advisory. So, they're strong across all those spheres. I would call them, as I said, they're the sort of leading independent. They're a sort of medium-sized group. And I think, one of the critical things for us is that they're people known to us. They've got extremely good track record. They've worked closely with the same Indonesian banks and lead financier that we are currently engaging with as part of our financing. So very familiar to them, and very familiar, and likewise the banks are very familiar with them. So that's a pretty important component of the whole thing. And aware of us that this project is of a meaningful scale to them. So we get their A team on the job, working with us and supporting us. So they're fit for purpose. They're the right size. They've got a lot of familiarity with what we're doing, a lot of familiarity with the banks and the various other components of the financing. So they're an ideal fit for us. people often ask me, well, why haven't you gone with a large name bank or something to that effect? But the reality is that, if you look at the scale of what we're trying to do here, it's a $235 million financing. Goldman Sachs or, one of the big players, they're interested in the multi-billion-dollar deals. So we're not going to get the A team. We're not going to get the same level of dedication and support that Grant Samuel's going to give us, where this size transaction is in their wheelhouse and very meaningful to them.
Yeah, Tony, in the previous RNS, you also mentioned that they're M&A specialists, as are China Zenith. Could you tell us a little bit more about the China angles that Asiamet's working? Because there's a little bit on those in the news release as well, particularly regarding the EPC areas. But potentially just a little bit more color on China Zenith and what they're doing with the company too.
Thanks, Asha. So again, Grant Samuel were appointed as sort of our overarching corporate advisors. Given our location, the location of our project in Indonesia, and the amount of investment coming out of China into Indonesia, and also the vast supply of equipment and machinery that's coming from China into the Indonesian mining industry. It's clearly we needed to have an advisor that was right in deep in that space. So China Zenith is a boutique advisory, well known to me over many years. Have done a number of assignments for us. They are based in Beijing. They specialise in the mining and metals space, and they have great connectivity through the various Chinese players in the industry. And that's from everything from the, basic engineering groups through the, construction groups, through the equipment groups, and also, investors into the mining space, whether they're investors at the project level or investors in M&A activity. Those guys have been involved with it for many years, ex-China Development Bank executives, so know the space very well and complement, the work that Grant Samuel's doing. They're being, coordinated under the umbrella of Grant Samuel, but they provide that sort of China angle in now. I've just been through with you before. We went through the capital stack. We talked about the debt component. We talked about the offtake component. And clearly we still have a gaps there that we need to fill. So, how we're going to fill that gap? We're going to fill that gap, through a number of different angles that we're working, as I said, around equipment finance, construction finance, etc. And Darren's very actively engaged with quite a few of those groups. As part of the process with Zenith, we've also had through them and through and independent of them, we've had parties who've expressed an interest in acquiring, part or whole of one of our projects or both of our projects. So as part of this whole process, it's beholden upon us to get as many options as we can on the table to solve for the 235 million, without coming back to the market to raise equity. Given our valuation where it sits today and the quantum that we need to put together, clearly it makes no sense to be thinking about taking any money out of the market. So they fill an important role across the whole spectrum of those things that I've just alluded to. And we're engaged with a whole range of different parties around those things, and that's both from the financial side, but also from the technical side that Darren's been leading.
Yeah, Darren. So you say in the RNS that they've begun to put a few things on the table, in regarding to these very positive discussions on the EPC side, especially, and potential partnering there as well. Could you please talk to that piece?
Yeah, the discussions we've had with some of the Chinese EPCM groups over the course of the last month have been good. And these are groups that are doing projects here in Indonesia, and I think that's been an important part for me, is that each country is different, and Indonesia has its own requirements for delivering projects, and being able to have those discussions with experienced international contractors who are delivering projects here has been useful, and we want to really sort of expand the opportunity for looking at how we can deliver the BKM heap leach project in some of these different models, which are different from the feasibility study update. But there's the opportunity. I mean, Tony has mentioned, with engaging with these groups, there are opportunities that come with financing, particularly if equipment is sourced out of a particular location, say it's China, then of course there's some potential opportunities there for how financing can be achieved. If we are looking at a lot of equipment coming out of one particular country, which would be the opportunity here for the BKM project. Now, notwithstanding, earlier this year we announced the engagement with an engineering firm with Bigram on one part of the BKM project. Still looking at their involvement and even potentially expanding their involvement to other parts of the BKM processing facility, and then how all of that may merge into certainly an overarching delivery of this project under a head contractor. So.
For investors listening to the call here, Bigram are actually the engineering group that did the work for Central Asia Metals on the building of their heap leach SX-EW copper operation in Kazakhstan. So, they're people very familiar with this type of project. Lots going on, as you can tell, across all the work streams. Look, Asiamet's really well placed. As I said earlier on, one of the very few companies that's got a development-ready project in feasibility study done, in the financing phase, engaging with banks, financiers, engineering groups, the whole works, and pushing this project forward into development. And I've also alluded to the shortage of sort of copper cathode and the hunger for securing raw materials from various trading groups in the region. So that bodes well for us in terms of getting a decent good outcome in terms of the offtake financing. There's lots and lots of activity across all of those things. We're very confident that we're going to get this done, push this through the financing and into development, and all that will happen over the remainder of this year and into early next year. We have a very strong underlying project, and we're clearly getting the engagement and interest out of all those parties we've talked about today because of the robustness of the project and its location and the demand for copper. So in good shape, clearly very undervalued. It's been like that for some time now, but we've got a team of people that are committed to doing this, have done this before, and are progressing all the steps to get us there. So we're confident we're going to get it done. More confident than we ever have been, to be quite honest. We've got a good, strong supporting shareholder that's sitting behind us all the way through. Not many groups can say that they've got that. They are there for the journey to see us through to the end result. I think we're feeling good, Sasha.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Thanks, Darren. I think that's a good point to wrap up. Thank you, gentlemen.